Hello guys, and welcome to part 2 of my walkthrough of the short Brutii campaign on Rome Total War 1. Now, last time we left off, I just conquered this town of Apollonia on the coast of modern-day Albania, I would think. And in between that episode and this episode, I conquered the large town of Thermon, declared war on the Greeks, and I've blockaded the port of Syracuse. So quite a bit has been going on, but not really important stuff. I'm just repairing my defences that I crushed at Thermon, and I've also pushed the Greeks back quite far. Now I've inflicted some nasty casualties on them, and I killed a couple of the generals, but hopefully we should draw more enemy forces in as they try to retake Thermon, so we can weaken the Greeks further by defeating them in more battles. And that's what I like to do in Total War games, is I capture a town that's important to the enemy with small but elite forces, and then draw them into a meat grinder, whereby I crush their forces slowly by wearing them down through attrition, and then building up my own bigger army to attack their capital city or port city, or something that's much more important to them. So, let's go on to the next turn. Now, one interesting thing I noticed with the Greeks on Rome Total War is they try to get a ceasefire with you all the time. I mean, Greece is the birthplace of democracy, but I don't know, I just don't understand why they ask for a ceasefire so often. Pardon me, there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, they've lost, like, one of their major cities. Like, don't they want to take it back at all? You know, it's not got a huge army protecting it. It's not like it's particularly toughly defended. It's really not. I mean, I don't really get it. But oh well. It's not like I care. Now I'm going to send one of my generals up to the north to conquer this little rebel town I've been ordered to take. Hopefully, I should be able to take it without much trouble, because I've only equipped this general with a couple of regiments of skirmishers and one regiment of light cavalry. But, like I said in the last episode, rebel towns, when you first encounter them at the start of the campaign, are not going to be tough. They're going to be pretty easy to defeat. So, again, not much to do this turn. Maybe send my
Awaiting your command.
my diplomat further up into Northern Europe, so I can negotiate some trade deals, buy my allies back. Yeah, I know, scumbag deal, whatever. And there's not really much I can do at the beginning, like I said in the last episode. But no, that's just the case. You will not do much at the beginning, except for I would suggest bunching your strongest units together into one army with most of your generals in it, and using that to conquer settlements at the beginning, so you have a strong attacking force to push back the enemy.
General, forward. Orders. Engage the enemy. Onward.
So yeah, I mean, it's just like the disposition of the Greeks, like I said in the last episode. Like, I don't know if I said this in the last episode, but the disposition of the Greeks at the beginning of the game is quite spread out. However, once you continue to push into their land, they begin to get more and more concentrated. So when you're playing as, like, say, the Brutii or any other army that's invading Greece, take that into account, because there are a lot of cities and a lot of narrow passes where you can get funneled into choke points while you're fighting through the country. And once you sort of push into the last few remaining bits of resistance in Greece, like usually around this area where Sparta is and Corinth is, you will likely face more concentrated and elite forces. So come in with a lot of heavy infantry, but also lots of archers, because the Greeks like to use heavy spear-armed infantry that formed up in phalanxes that are hard to take from the front with heavy infantry. So take that into account as well, and have generally have flexible forces at your disposal, because you'll need them to take on the Greeks, because they're much more stoic and slow moving, but also much tougher to beat in a head-to-head fight. So we've come across a rebel army, and I've got to defeat them if I want to take the settlement of Salona to the north. Now these guys shouldn't be too hard, because I've got a lot of skirmishers, got a bit of cavalry, and I've also got some mercenary Greek spearmen myself, some hoplites they're called. And the hoplites were much less sort of like tactically flexible than the Roman legions, because whereas the Roman legions formed up into sort of a checkered formation of 5,000 sort of men all made up of like cavalry, infantry and bowmen, the Greek hoplite phalanxes would usually be about, each one would be maybe about 80 at the very least, like, and as you can see, like 4 or 5 deep here. And they had a lot of power going forwards, but they were very, inflexible. Okay, so the enemy have gone all the way to that corner of the map. So I'm just going to speed up the game here, because otherwise it will take absolutely forever for us to wait for the forces to get there. I'm just wondering what kind of forces they have there. Alright. So it only looks like they've got skirmishers and peasants there. So I'm going to spread my cavalry out, and I'm going to put them into a charge against the skirmishers. They're going to be going uphill, but seeing as how they're in spread out formation, that shouldn't worry too much. So I've convinced them to flee for a moment. Attack the peasants, go back downhill. Hopefully they'll chase after me. Right, they're chasing after me. Now to counterattack. Now they're dispersed, I can counterattack with the crushing power of my cavalry, and use the striking power of my cavalry to crush the enemy while they spread out as they're chasing my cavalry. And that's what's called a feigned retreat. You attack the enemy, pull back, and make it seem like you're retreating, but then you counterattack immediately as they're spread out.
Their true virtue. They are not soldiers, only frightened rabbits running from our men.
And that's a tactic you should always take into account, maybe consider doing when you're fighting with a lot of cavalry, because it is a bloody good tactic to use when you've got a lot of cavalry. And especially, actually, if you have lighter forces, if you have generally less men, that will really work well against large forces of infantry where you're heavily outnumbered and you need to sort of whittle them down, or you're fighting on waiting for reinforcements. So I'm just going to build a couple of trading posts in my 2 cities there to get some extra revenue incoming. And in fact, that's probably one of my favourite tactics to do, is the feigned retreat, because it's especially good actually when you're fighting uphill, or you're fighting against sort of heavily armoured infantry like hoplites or entrenched infantry, because you'll draw them out of their positions, make them get all disjumbled and confused and spread out, and then you get your cavalry, form them back into a line and charge them back in while the enemy is spread out and confused. Then they'll cut down the first few ranks while they're all spread out and smash into the centre of the enemy regiment, and generally do a lot more damage, so always take that into account. Right, so I think we're going to cap off this episode by attacking the town of Salona.
Prepare for battle. Besieging settlements,
In fact, I'll just recruit some local mercenaries, just 1 extra regiment of local mercenaries, and then launch the attack. Hopefully this shouldn't be too difficult, but unlike when I attacked that other town in the first episode, Apollonia, the proportion of forces I had against the enemy was much more in my favour. I outnumbered them roughly, give or take, about I'd say about 3 to 1. Here, I only outnumber them by about 100 men, so I have a much higher chance of losing. But I can still win this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do essentially the same tactic that I did last time. I'm going to divide up my forces. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put all my skirmishers and my 1 regiment of light cavalry on one side of the town to pin the enemy down. Now send in a slightly smaller but stronger force of my general with his heavy cavalry and my hoplite heavy infantry in to attack the other side of the town to draw the enemy into a meat grinder. So I've set the hoplites to off mode on their phalanxes. And you can see the enemy have only got 1 regiment of skirmishers they're sending out. I've got 4. These guys don't stand a chance. Oh, look at that. They're just getting mullered by the mounted javelins going in against them. And now their backs are turned to my men, their shields aren't up to protect them against the javelins, so they're suffering even worse. So how are the other guys doing? Right, okay, they're doing fine. I think I'm going to send them in. Now in the streets they'll prove quite effective because it's in very narrow space. That's where their hoplite phalanx formation will work exceptionally well. I'm going to send in the skirmishers a bit closer. And I don't know why the enemy sent out their skirmishers to attack me head on. It cost them a lot of men. But, and I don't know why they did such a terrible idea, because, I mean, I've set the enemy here on this campaign to go into medium mode, so they're not easy, but they're not super hard, but they're not entirely pushovers either. So why they just did something so stupid is beyond me. But then again, the AI I think in this game aren't the best calibrated or programmed, but at the same time, you've got bigger things to worry about than that when you're fighting in huge battles like you will probably later on in the campaign. So, as you can see here, lighter troops, more immediate outnumbering that regiment of phalanx spearmen there, but because they were funneled into such a narrow pass, the better armour and the spears and the shields and swords of my hoplites are just wrecking those skirmishers, who are much more lightly armed and lightly armoured. And now the other regiment of my hoplites is getting stuck in. Go on, lads, have it. Right, so now I'm going to send them in to attack the second enemy line of their hoplites, which gives me the chance to send my skirmishers rushing in. I send my general up nearby my hoplites to give them a bit of morale boost. I don't really need it anyway. I mean, oh man, look at that. They're absolutely munching the enemy militia hoplites. Oh, that's what mercenary hoplites would do for you. They're not the best unit in the game, but they're cheap, expendable, and bloody effective in narrow passes. Just look at that, they're munching those enemy hoplites. So I'll send my skirmishers in to eliminate the last remaining bit of their skirmisher force.
The heart of the enemy general with fear.
Killed their general with my cavalry.
Be praised. The enemy general is killed. Fear makes a home in our enemies' hearts.
pull my skirmishers back before those pirate light infantrymen get them, and then send in the hoplites to do their dirty work again. And now they're a bit more spread out, but at the same time they're going forwards, and the pirates are positioned in such a way that they can only go into the front of my phalanx, meaning that they get pulverized by the spears and swords and shields. So now the spearmen are out of immediate danger, I'm going to send them back in again to attack the pirates in the flank. Get my general to rally the troops to fight even harder. And now those guys are done. Come on boys, keep attacking, there's only a few of them left. Yeah, this battle's pretty much won. I might have overwhelmed them a bit quicker if I'd gone in from the front with just one single force, but at the same time I might have suffered slightly more casualties. I mean, I don't know. I would always suggest when you're attacking a town to attack from at least two directions.
The enemy army is in flight. Pursue them and drive them from the battlefield.
And the reason being for that is it will divide up the enemy's forces more and make them more divided. And while you could pose the argument that it might make your forces weaker because you're dividing them up, at the same time it will also make the enemy forces weaker because you're dividing them up. And usually when you're attacking a town, usually, not always, but usually, the defending force will be outnumbered.
Rome demands.
So that was a pretty good battle there. Killed the entire enemy garrison for the loss of only 41 men out of just a little over 450. So that's a good battle, that good victory.
Settlement captured.
Not a big settlement, but it's given me a lot of control. It's a thin strip of land. It's also a long strip of land. It's given me a lot of control over the modern day Yugoslavian coast of the Adriatic Sea. I think that's the Adriatic Sea. It might be the Tyrrhenian Sea, but still, that's a good victory. That games have been thrown in my honour at the Senate's expense, and I've gained a higher noting in the Senate and the military. So that was a good battle. That's not a very big settlement, and it doesn't control a huge swathe of land, but it's given me a lot of control over the coastline. And hopefully when the settlement gets big enough I can upgrade this little fishing port here to a actual port. So, again, if you ever find yourself attacking a settlement and you haven't got a huge numerical advantage over the enemy, divide your forces up into two parts, with the strongest, most toughest in one part, and the massive sort of like light infantry and conscripts in the other, and attack them from two directions. Maybe send your general with the conscripts to inspire them, because there'll be, you know, lesser troops there. Less effective, but try doing that if you've got less troops. If you've got a much bigger army, might not work so bad to just attack from one direction, but even then might be more effective attack from two directions. Anyway, that should wrap it up for this episode. Next episode I should try probably pushing further into the Greek interior and crushing, hopefully, Athens, which is about here. But until next time, I'll see you guys on the battlefield. Take care, have fun, and I'll see you guys next time.